The Cold War was never only about armies or borders. It was a war of secrets. Behind the speeches and parades, behind the missiles on display and the flags at the United Nations, there was another battlefield, one made of documents, codes, and whispers in darkened rooms. It was here, in the shadows, that the United States and the Soviet Union fought some of their most decisive battles. And in those early years, nothing mattered more than the secret of the atomic bomb. When the mushroom cloud rose over Hiroshima in August of 1945, the world changed in a single flash. The United States had unveiled a weapon of unimaginable power, one that could incinerate cities in moments. To American leaders, it was a guarantee of superiority, a shield that would deter any enemy. To Joseph Stalin and his circle, it was a threat so grave that it could not be tolerated. If the Soviet Union did not possess the same weapon, it would live under the shadow of annihilation. What Stalin understood, and what American leaders underestimated, was that the race for nuclear weapons would not be decided only in laboratories. It would also be decided in the clandestine world of espionage. Long before Hiroshima, Soviet intelligence had already infiltrated the Manhattan Project. Networks of agents, some driven by ideology, others by pressure or money, were passing secrets from American research facilities directly to Moscow. The decisive years of the war were also the decisive years of a hidden operation that would erase America's nuclear monopoly far sooner than expected. One of the most important figures was Klaus Fuchs, a German physicist who had fled the Nazis and found work in Britain, later transferred to Los Alamos as part of the Anglo-American project. To his colleagues, he was quiet, diligent, unremarkable. But to the Soviet Union, he was priceless. Fuchs believed that no single country should hold the atomic secret. That balance was safer than monopoly. Motivated by ideology rather than greed, he delivered detailed information about the design of the bomb, sketches, equations, and descriptions of critical processes. His reports gave Soviet scientists a map through the dense forest of nuclear physics, saving them years of trial and error. Alongside Fuchs, there were others. The American couple Julius and Ethel Rosenberg became symbols of this hidden war. Julius, an engineer, recruited contacts who had access to military electronics and atomic research. Ethel's role remains debated, but the network she and her husband belonged to transmitted valuable details about detonators and weapon components. Arrested in 1950, tried and executed in 1953, they remain among the most controversial figures of the Cold War. To some, they were traitors who endangered their country. To others, they were scapegoats, punished more for politics than for proof. What cannot be doubted is that the flow of information from their network reached Moscow at a critical time. The Soviet intelligence services, above all the NKVD and later the KGB, coordinated these efforts with precision. They worked through couriers, codenames, and dead drops. Documents were photographed in secret apartments, notes hidden in hollow objects, reports transmitted through carefully encrypted cables. American counterintelligence tried to catch up, but during the war years, the focus was on defeating Hitler, not policing every scientist in the project. This gave Soviet agents room to operate. When Soviet scientists detonated their first atomic bomb in August of 1949, only 4 years after Hiroshima, the world was stunned. American experts had predicted it would take the Soviet Union at least a decade to catch up. Instead, the monopoly was gone in less than half that time. The design of the Soviet bomb bore striking similarities to the American plutonium device tested at Alamogordo. This was no coincidence. Espionage had closed the gap. For the United States, the shock was profound. The belief that the bomb guaranteed security was shattered. Overnight, American cities were as vulnerable as Moscow. The balance of power had changed, and it had changed because secrets had slipped through the cracks of security. The revelation sparked waves of investigations, loyalty oaths, and the rise of anti-communist hysteria. Suspicion fell on scientists, on government workers, on anyone with foreign connections. The early Red Scare, already fueled by fear of communist influence, now had the atomic bomb at its center. In Moscow, the mood was triumphant. Stalin congratulated his scientists, but he knew the victory was not theirs alone. He had long demanded that the intelligence services deliver what was needed, and they had delivered. Soviet propaganda did not admit the role of espionage, presenting the bomb as the fruit of pure socialist science. Yet within the Kremlin there was no doubt. The theft of secrets had given them a weapon that changed history. The espionage did not stop with the bomb. Once the Soviet Union had achieved parity in fission weapons, attention turned to fusion, the hydrogen bomb. Again, intelligence gathered abroad accelerated the process. Again, agents in the West passed along fragments of knowledge that Soviet scientists could piece together. Each breakthrough in America or Britain echoed in Moscow, not instantly, but far sooner than it might have through independent research alone. What made these stories remarkable was not only the scale of the secrets stolen, but the motivations of those who gave them. Some, like Fuchs, believed they were serving humanity by preventing nuclear monopoly. Others acted out of loyalty to communism, convinced that the Soviet Union represented the future. A few were simply manipulated or blackmailed. Each of them, knowingly or not, contributed to the shaping of the balance that would define the Cold War. The Americans responded with ever tighter security. Laboratories were ringed with fences, scientists screened and monitored. The FBI expanded its reach, listening, watching, infiltrating. Yet no wall was perfect. The Soviets also expanded their networks, placing agents not only in military projects but in universities, diplomatic missions, and industrial firms. The hunger for secrets was insatiable because secrets meant survival. The atomic spies set the tone for the decades to come. The Cold War would be fought not only in public crises, but in the invisible exchanges of intelligence. The capture of a single document, the recording of a single conversation, could alter strategy, delay projects, or inspire fear. The battlefield was everywhere. In laboratories, in embassies, in conference halls, in quiet suburban houses where agents photographed stolen papers late at night. Looking back, it is clear that without espionage, the Soviet Union would have needed far longer to build its bomb. Without espionage, the United States might have retained its monopoly through the 1950s. History might have unfolded differently. Instead, because of stolen secrets, the balance of terror arrived early, shaping politics, culture, and psychology on both sides of the Iron Curtain. The first phase of the secret war was complete. The Soviet Union had broken the American monopoly. The United States had learned that even the tightest project could be penetrated, and the world had entered an age where knowledge itself was a weapon, guarded and stolen, traded in shadows. The Cold War was only beginning, but its course had already been changed by documents smuggled in briefcases, by sketches drawn in secret, by men and women who lived double lives for causes larger than themselves. The atomic bomb was not the end of the secret war. It was the beginning. Once the Soviet Union had closed the gap in nuclear weapons, the struggle moved into new territories, into rockets, aircraft, and the race for space itself. Every breakthrough in technology was treated as treasure, and every treasure became the target of spies. In laboratories, in research institutes, and in factories, the quiet war of stolen knowledge grew deeper and more complex. During the late 1940s and early 1950s, rocket science became the crown jewel of espionage. The United States had captured German scientists at the end of the war, most famously Wernher von Braun and his team, who were brought to America under the program that became known as Operation Paperclip. Their knowledge of the V-2 rocket laid the foundation for the American missile and space programs. The Soviet Union, too, seized German specialists, transferring hundreds to work in Soviet design bureaus. But Moscow wanted more than German expertise. It wanted to know what the Americans were building, how far they had gone, and how quickly. Soviet agents began targeting American research in rocketry and aviation. In Washington, in California, in New Mexico, quiet men and women gathered fragments of information about missile tests, about jet engines, about radar systems. These fragments were passed to Moscow, where scientists assembled them into a picture of American progress. The effort was relentless. Every breakthrough in the United States was shadowed by questions in the Kremlin. How soon can we match this? How can we surpass it? The Americans, for their part, also sought Soviet secrets. The Central Intelligence Agency, created in 1947, made it a priority to understand what Moscow was building. Agents were sent into Eastern Europe, into Soviet-occupied Germany, into the very heart of the new Iron Curtain. Many of these missions failed, their participants captured or killed, but information still flowed. The United States wanted to know the scale of Soviet industry, the power of its new jet fighters, the progress of its atomic and later hydrogen weapons. By the mid-1950s, the focus turned toward the heavens. The Soviet Union shocked the world in October of 1957 with the launch of Sputnik, the first artificial satellite. The beeping signal that circled the Earth was more than a scientific triumph. It was a declaration that Soviet rockets could reach anywhere, including American cities. The surprise was total. American newspapers declared a crisis, politicians accused the government of falling behind, and fear spread that a missile gap threatened national survival. What many did not know was that the race to space was also a race of espionage. Soviet intelligence had worked tirelessly to gather information about American rocket tests, about satellite plans, about the use of captured German expertise. At the same time, American spies sought to penetrate Soviet programs to discover how advanced their launch vehicles truly were. Each side accused the other of propaganda, but each side also knew that secrets mattered as much as achievements. The United States responded with dramatic investment. NASA was created in 1958, and billions of dollars poured into missile and space projects. The Soviets doubled down as well, elevating Sergei Korolev, the genius behind their rockets, to a position of immense influence, though his identity remained a state secret. Espionage did not replace science, but it accelerated it. Knowing what the other side was attempting pushed both programs to greater speed, greater ambition. The invisible war extended beyond rockets. Jet aircraft capable of flying higher and faster became vital in the Cold War contest. The Soviet MiG fighters astonished American pilots in the skies over Korea. American engineers demanded to know their secrets. At the same time, Soviet agents worked to acquire blueprints of American bombers and fighters, studying them for weaknesses. Each plane in the sky carried with it years of hidden exchanges, of files photographed and smuggled, of engineers who doubled as informants. Perhaps the most dramatic symbol of this shadow war came in May of 1960, when an American U-2 reconnaissance plane was shot down over Soviet territory. The pilot, Francis Gary Powers, was captured alive, and Moscow displayed both man and wreckage to the world. For the Soviet Union, it was proof that America was spying from the skies. For the United States, it was a humiliation, an admission that espionage was not a rumor, but a fact. The incident destroyed a planned summit between Eisenhower and Khrushchev, deepening the Cold War at a moment when peace had seemed possible. The U-2 affair revealed just how far the struggle for secrets had gone. The Americans were desperate to see inside the closed Soviet world. Satellites did not yet exist. Aircraft like the U-2 were the only way to photograph missile bases, test sites, and industrial complexes. The Soviets, furious at the violation of their skies, accelerated their own anti-aircraft systems and pressed propaganda of American aggression. The crisis reminded the world that espionage was not abstract. It could bring nations to the edge of open conflict. Beneath these dramatic episodes lay countless smaller stories. Soviet agents smuggled microfilm of American electronics, helping Soviet missiles guide more accurately. American agents bribed technicians in Eastern Europe to provide circuit diagrams, giving insights into Soviet radar. Couriers carried briefcases full of documents across borders, sometimes vanishing, sometimes arrested, sometimes disappearing forever into prisons or graves. Each fragment of paper was a piece of a puzzle that shaped global strategy. The technology stolen or guarded during this period was not merely about weapons. It included communications, cryptography, and even agricultural and industrial processes. The Cold War was total, and knowledge in every field was considered a potential asset. Espionage widened beyond spies in trench coats. It included students studying abroad, scientists attending conferences, businessmen traveling with samples. Each encounter carried the possibility of hidden exchange. The rocket race, culminating in Sputnik and then in Gagarin's flight in 1961, embodied the drama of this era. To the world, it was a competition of science. To the insiders, it was also a competition of secrets, of who had learned what, of who had stolen what. The Soviet Union's triumphs in space were genuine, the result of brilliant engineers and immense effort, but they were also reinforced by the information gathered abroad. The United States, humiliated at first, responded with its own advances, culminating in the Apollo program. That, too, was shaped by intelligence, by the constant measuring of Soviet capabilities. The invisible war of technology was relentless because neither side could afford ignorance. If the Soviets had a missile that could strike America, Washington needed to know. If the Americans had a bomber that could evade defenses, Moscow needed to copy it. Each failure to obtain a secret risked catastrophe. Each success in espionage bought time, confidence, and leverage. By the end of the 1950s, the Cold War had become as much about information as about weapons. Missiles stood in silos, planes patrolled skies, but behind them were libraries of stolen documents, rooms full of intercepted signals, files marked secret, and eyes only. The spy was as important as the soldier, the photograph as decisive as the tank. Looking back, it is clear that the technological rivalry between the Soviet Union and the United States was shaped not only by innovation, but by espionage. Without stolen secrets, progress would have been slower, risks greater. Without espionage, surprises would have been more dangerous. The Invisible War may not have been celebrated in parades, but it changed the course of history, one document at a time. By the early 1960s, the Cold War had fully matured into a world of rival camps, nuclear arsenals, and ceaseless propaganda. Yet, beneath the official speeches and the grand strategies, the decisive struggle often took place in shadows. Spies moved quietly through European capitals. Couriers carried briefcases filled with stolen papers, and codes whispered across the airwaves told more than armies ever could. The theft of secrets was not a side note of history. It was its engine. The Cuban Missile Crisis of 1962 revealed just how critical intelligence had become. American reconnaissance flights over the island brought back photographs of long-range missiles being installed by Soviet crews. Grainy images taken from high altitude showed launchers, warheads, and soldiers in tropical fields. To the untrained eye, they were smudges of black and gray. To the analysts in Washington, they were proof of a threat that could change the world. Without those photographs, the missiles might have been deployed in secret, altering the balance of nuclear power. With them, the United States confronted the Soviet Union, demanding withdrawal and pushing the planet to the edge of nuclear war. For the Soviet leadership, the crisis was a lesson in vulnerability. Their attempts to alter the balance through secrecy had been exposed by American eyes in the sky. For the Americans, it was a vindication of espionage, proof that intelligence could prevent disaster. The tense days of October showed that information was as powerful as divisions of soldiers. Secrets, revealed at the right moment, could force entire empires to back down. Across Europe, the game of infiltration reached extraordinary depths. Soviet intelligence placed agents within the very governments of American allies. Files later revealed that men and women working in ministries in West Germany, in France, even in Britain, quietly reported to Moscow. Some provided troop schedules, some economic data, some the moods of their leaders. To the West, the realization that their allies might be compromised bred paranoia. To the Soviet Union, it confirmed that patience and quiet work could yield results greater than battles. The Americans, through the Central Intelligence Agency, ran their own networks across Eastern Europe. They funded underground newspapers, supported dissidents, and attempted to recruit officials disillusioned with Moscow's grip. Some missions succeeded, many failed, but each was part of a constant effort to pry open the Iron Curtain. Radio stations like Radio Free Europe broadcast news and commentary into Warsaw and Budapest, while agents smuggled leaflets, printing presses, and even small radios into the East. Every message carried across the border was a challenge to Soviet control. In Asia and Africa, where new nations were emerging from colonial rule, intelligence battles often determined the direction of entire governments. In Iran, in 1953, the CIA orchestrated the overthrow of Prime Minister Mossadegh, fearing his policies might bring the country closer to Moscow. In Guatemala the following year, another operation toppled a government that had nationalized land, alarming American corporations and policymakers. The Soviet Union watched these actions carefully, responding with its own efforts to cultivate allies in Egypt, India, and beyond. Stolen documents, intercepted cables, and secret funding shaped the destinies of peoples who often never realized that their countries were pieces on the Cold War chessboard. Back in the United States, espionage also bred fear. The hunt for Soviet moles within the government never truly ended. The revelations of men like Kim Philby, part of the British intelligence service but secretly loyal to Moscow, deepened the paranoia. If someone of such stature could be a spy, then who else might be? Investigations spread, careers ended, suspicion became a constant undercurrent. For the Soviet Union, such successes were trophies. For the West, they were humiliations. Inside the Soviet Union itself, the game of secrecy was total. The KGB monitored foreign diplomats, tapped phones, followed journalists. Every conversation with a Soviet citizen was potentially reported. Every meeting weighed for hidden meaning. Western embassies were riddled with listening devices, some hidden in walls, some in furniture, some so small they escaped detection for years. American and British technicians combed their offices for bugs, sometimes finding microphones in the very structures of the buildings. It was a reminder that in Moscow, privacy did not exist. The theft of codes and ciphers was another front. Both sides invested enormous resources into code breaking and code making. The Americans had broken Japanese and German codes during the Second World War, and they continued to refine their craft. The Soviets, equally determined, developed their own systems and sought to crack those of their enemies. One intercepted message could reveal troop movements. One broken cipher could expose an entire network of spies. Code work was invisible, but it was the heartbeat of the secret war. The climax of these shadow battles was not always dramatic. Sometimes it was a quiet handover of film in a park, a meeting in a hotel room, a package left in a mailbox. Yet the consequences of such moments could shift the balance of power. A single stolen blueprint might save years of research. A single roll of microfilm might expose dozens of agents. A single confession under interrogation might unravel a network built over a decade. The drama of espionage was measured not in battles, but in ripples that spread through the corridors of power. By the 1970s, espionage had become an accepted part of the Cold War landscape. Both sides knew they were infiltrated. Both sides knew they were spying. Yet neither could stop. The cost of ignorance was too high. Leaders in Washington needed to know if Soviet missiles were on alert. Leaders in Moscow needed to know if America was preparing a strike. Knowledge meant survival. And so the cycle continued, endlessly, relentlessly. Looking back, it is easy to see how much history was bent by the flow of stolen secrets. The Soviet atomic bomb appeared years earlier than expected because of espionage. The Cuban Missile Crisis ended short of war because of reconnaissance photographs. Countless small confrontations were influenced by documents smuggled, by tapes recorded, by codes cracked. The Cold War was fought in public, but it was won or lost in secret rooms. For the people who lived through it, the secret war was mostly invisible. They read headlines about summits and speeches, about treaties and threats. Few knew that beneath those headlines lay another story of men and women who carried envelopes under their coats, who lived double lives, who died in silence. Their work rarely made the news, but their shadows stretch across the century. The Cold War may be over, but the lessons of its secret battles remain. Knowledge is power, and in the modern world, secrets can be as decisive as armies. The documents stolen between Washington and Moscow did not merely record history, they wrote it. Subscribe us. And don't say goodbye.